This bit is going to show you a solo flawless Spire of the Watcher dungeon on a Titan Fuzz. Just want to see that and skip the timestamps. Other than that, I can show you the mods, the weapons, etc. So when you get your solo flawless, this is the emblem that you'll be rewarded with. It's called Flight of Soteria. As far as aesthetically as it looks, I think it's a good 8 or 9 out of 10. I like the way it looks. Other dungeons that we had, so we had Shattered Throne. That wasn't solo flawless, it was just solo. But that's the Eternal Return. It was a good looking emblem. Then we had Pit of Heresy, which was also a good looking emblem. Then we got Prophecy, which in my opinion is the best dungeon that we've ever had, and it's also the best looking emblem that we have, I think, for solo flawless. Then you have Grasp, which was really a letdown, didn't look nice. And then you had Duality, the emblem looks fine, but as far as this emblem, if you want to just chase it for the emblem sort of thing, as opposed to bragging rights or whatever, then the emblem's really good. It's a nice looking emblem. I'm pleased with how that turned out. So that's how it looks. So the build itself, this is the build I'm going to be using for most of the time. My resilience is tier 10, tier 9 discipline. Those are the stats you want to focus on. And then a bit of recovery if you can. So we're on Sunbreaker Titan. Hammer of Sol is the super. Don't use the other one. Use Hammer of Sol. Rally Barricade. Throw and Hammer, Healing Grenade, aspects of Roaring Flames, Sol Invictus. My fragments are Ember of Singeing, Wonder, Solace, Torches. We do switch to Hammer Strike at some jumping parts, but that's literally it. Weapon-wise, we're using the Exotic Grenade Launcher Witherhoard for obvious reasons this season. We're using Calus Mini Tool because it's got synergy with Solar 3.0 on the Solar Titan. Plus, you want a run and gun style weapon for this dungeon. It's night and day. You cannot use scouts. Don't be using scouts and stuff, especially on a solo. So I would either pick between a sidearm, auto rifle, or SMG. So like an auto rifle, a fast fire one isn't too bad in this. I think SMGs are the way to go. Whatever SMG you're comfortable with using, it'll work to you. But just use one that you like to fire and stuff like that. Right, there's countless SMGs, like Funnel Web's another good one. I'm using Calus because it's got synergy with my class. We start with a sword at the start, just for some reasons I'll talk about. I know it's got Taken spec on it, but that's whatever. When we get to the first boss fight, we'll swap to Cataclysmic, a linear fusion rifle. If you do not have a Cataclysmic with bait and switch at all, I recommend that you use Taipan. Use a Taipan or a Reed's Regret or any good linear fusion rifle that you like to use. It doesn't have to preferably be solar per se, right? But yeah, Taipan's going to be a good one, I think, for people, and a lot of people have it, so use that. I have tested it and it works okay in this. Not as good as bait and switch, but it works fine. And then for the final boss, we use a rocket launcher. Right, now this has overflow vorpal because I can shoot 2 rockets, so it's a big deal for me. Right, so I went with the Hezen Vengeance, plus it's solar, has some synergy with my mods. Rockets for you to use, any rocket that's comfortable with you that's good for damage. Any good rockets that you like to use. All right, it's up to yourself, but a solar rocket will give you that little bit more if you use the build, that I'm going to recommend. So the armor mods and obviously the exotic is Splendor Helm, which is the support exotic for Solar Sunbreaker, which I talked about in the run. Mods wise, we're using Linear Fusion Rifle, Ammo Finder, Harmonic Siphon, Elemental Charge, Overload SMG, SMG Loader, Font of Might, High Energy Fire, Concussive Dampener, Void Resist, Linear Fusion Scavenger, Melee Wellmaker, and then for your class piece, Weakened Clear and Solo Operative. I switched some mods up. I'll switch to Rocket Scav when I'm on Rocket, and I've made my Splendor Arc. This is a key point, and I'll put hands on at some point. It's near the end of the fight. So that's the build. That's the general information about what to bring for the dungeon. But this is the run. Okay, so as we start, you've got the initial encounter, which is teaching you the basics of the dungeon. For editing purposes, to ease it up, to make my life a little bit easier, I'm just going to speed up the footage up until the first main encounter where you're building the tower, right? Because I'm literally killing 2 adds here, 2 or 3 adds, that is it. This starting encounter is to teach you how this dungeon works, and literally this is really the only mechanic really in the dungeon technically, apart from DPS. So just follow the route on screen. What you need to realise, there's a lot of wires, and it's going to look overwhelming to you, this starting encounter, if you haven't seen any video footage. It did overwhelm me when I first sort of... I came in blind day 1 and stuff. But you've got to break it up left and right. There's 2 routes each side. Each side is like a little passageway that you go in to get the start. So you always need to figure out where's the start, right, and then work your way backwards with it. So yeah, just follow the route on screen. If you wanted to know in depth these routes, then this video isn't going to be ideal for you because I've sped it up, but it is literally just follow the route, you know. So there's nothing to this start. There is Cyclopses, right, but we're not going to deal with the Cyclopses at all. That's where the Splendor comes in. So if I'm weak, I get my Sunspot off the Splendor, or I'll use a Healing Grenade. Just depends on the situation. Be careful of the Supplicants. Now, we've got the sword on for this bit. You could easily lose a Solar Flawless in that jump right away. Right? So the sword, me blocking with the sword, right, will stop me from wiping. That's the only reason why I've got it on. And just to quickly kill a Minotaur if I want to rebuff. So, talking about the buff that you get from the Minotaurs, it resets your buff to 30 seconds. And the pool on the floor sits there for quite a bit. So you can stand in that pool and you still have that 30 seconds. It doesn't just disappear right away. You can get higher than 30 seconds when you chain kill the fuses. I've switched to Hammer Strike here just because of easiness when I'm doing jumping. Now, Lion Rampants, I recommend you put that on. The reason why I didn't is because I didn't have it on me. Bungie's API is down. Destiny Tracker's down. I could not be bothered going down but to the vault to go and pick that up. Lion Rampants. I didn't need to. I've got the shoulder charge. I've got a sword on. I'm happy enough with that. There's no jump that requires Lion Rampants. Just that it will make some people's lives a little easier. So use it if you need to. And again, it's just following the route on screen. This is the first encounter, though, just about coming up. But this is where you build the tower, right? You're putting current to the tower or whatever it is. And again, it's just repeating the mechanic. This is where I'll play the footage properly now. Because you need to really know where the fuses are on this encounter. Like the encounter that I just done before, you don't really need to know too much. Just that... you know, you understand the idea, but when you get to this encounter, it's best to get into a routine, right? So this is the start. There's 2 yellow currents, we're going to call them, obviously. Well, there's only yellow on this encounter. So I like to go right first. I feel as though right. This is the first phase. It's broken into 3 floors, let's call it. This is the first floor, right? So I like to go right first, just because the fuse is a little bit more awkward. You're going to ignore all adds. Once you get it into your system that you are gonna be right, I'm not even doing any ad clear. It makes the encounter easier. Trust me, when day 1 blind, when I was having to go at this, I was like clearing ads and stuff like this. You don't need to do any of that stuff. You just need to run past them all, clear the ad 1 or 2 if they get close like that with quickly with a throwing hammer, and then go about your day. There'll be some hydras that spawn on the outside of the map. Again, you ignore those as well. That's where your routine comes in, though. In order to skip the ads and all that stuff, you need to know the fuses, where they are in advance. So you might need to do this a couple of times to get the repetition in. Yeah? Until you smooth it where exactly all the fuses are. Like, there's no point me giving you that's what's going to be hard about giving commentary on this dungeon, I've realised, is that I can't really give much commentary about saying, right, this fuse is here, this fuse is on the right, this fuse is on the left. Like, that's pointless commentary to me, that. But that's the only thing that's really going on in this dungeon. I don't know how I feel about this dungeon yet, in terms of quality, in terms of how it's matched up to the other dungeons. It doesn't feel like a dungeon. I don't know if anyone else is with me on that. It doesn't feel like a dungeon. It feels obviously more than a strike, because obviously it is. But it just feels like its own thing. It feels nice to have a Vex themed dungeon, but there's no combat difficulty apart from the final boss. There's no combat difficulty on the first encounter. There's no combat difficulty on building the tower right now because we're just doing the mechanic, right? There's no combat difficulty on the first boss, which is a harpy. There's no combat difficulty on that one. So where is the combat difficulty? That's what I am here for as a Destiny 2 player, right? But Destiny's at its best when they mold mechanic plus combat experience together. And I don't think they've done it with this one. Take like the best raid ever made, Wrath of the Machine. Why was that probably the best raid ever made? Because it molds the mechanics and combat experience perfect. This dungeon's got the balance to mechanic. Although the mechanic doesn't mean to say that it's hard. You are just literally shooting fuses. And you need to get into the rhythm of where they are. Right? So the mechanic ain't a bad one. But the incentive is to skip all enemies, and I don't like that. I know Master's going to have champs in, but you're probably going to skip them as well, unless you're getting a buff. Unless you need to get your buff from the Overlord Minotaur, you're going to be skipping most ads because you can keep that buff up. So I don't know how I feel about this dungeon. So I just thought I would say a couple of words. I still, if you're interested, that's the first encounter done, so you can see you just follow the route on screen. So if you're interested to know, to date, still my favourite dungeon of all time is Prophecy. Because I think, even though it is moats, and people are fed up of moats with Gambit, it doesn't feel like that to me in Prophecy. Because everything's so good. Boss DPS, the bosses are well designed. Now the bosses are well designed in this. The final boss in this is so well designed, I love the final boss. I'd like this boss as well. Right? But it's the boss DPS, and I'm going to talk about it at length, right? Because it needs to be talked about. So, before I do that though, I'll explain the fight. So, for those that don't know, there's 4 sections, right? With 4 yellow currents in each side. So you need to fill each current on each side, and there's electrical charge at the end of each runway. So you've got 4 runways, right? You need to fulfill all the 4 runways. The charges, the electric towers, need to go away, and then boss DPS starts. That's what you need to do. But the first thing that you need to do is literally just go and kill a Minotaur. And then get your buff, and then follow the routes as you see them. Now, some of the fuses are on the side of the building and stuff like that. The biggest threat to you in this, I'm not kidding you, is falling off the map. It's falling off the map or having the boss knock you off the map. It's rare, but I've actually had the boss like sort of bump into me because the boss can't stomp because it's a harpy. But it sort of sometimes comes on the runways and then sort of knocks you jump. I've had that happen, and the boss sometimes does this weird teleport move, which I like, but it serves no purpose. I wish that was some sort of integrated mechanic where the boss teleports and then you've got to get a stun or something like that, like before DPS. Kind of like on Garden of Salvation, right, on the first sort of section, but that isn't a thing. So yeah, it's just a case of what you want to do. Obviously on phase 1, this by the way is going to take you 4 phases minimum. If you're a really good player, 3 phases, which I've seen a player do that, which was exceptional by him. But 4 phases is going to be the minimum, 5 for most. And then even 6, 7, if you haven't got the right linear fusion rifle, which I feel as though is very... I don't think that's fair, that one particular linear in the game allows you to sort of really bypass damage and sort of 4 and 3 phase, whereas nothing else in the game will, solo-wise. Now, I haven't tried things like Parasite or maybe some unique weapons that might do some unique stuff. So not everything's laid by law yet, but it's the consensus that linears are probably the best for this boss fight. So we're on the final tower. What am I doing now? Why am I doing what I'm doing? Well, I'm going to leave the last fuse untouched. I'm on the final tower. I'm not going to start DPS. Why is that? Well, because for every tower that for every runway that you complete, you get a phase of harpies. So there'll be 4 phases of harpies. They cluster up as well. But the thing with that is, I don't want harpies up during DPS. I know people are doing DPS with harpies up, and it saves so much time. because you're just doing the forward runway, start DPS. It's so much quicker, and I understand that it is. But as a console player, I don't want harpies up because they will mess with my aim. And if my aims get messed up on DPS, I am wasting my time because DPS is so critical to get correct. I want nothing in my way. I don't want aim assist messing up, because aim assist's a nightmare. In this dungeon, I can't believe how much aim assist has plagued my runs in this. I wish you could just turn off aim assist. I don't want it on. Like, you can be shooting the boss's eyes, one random goblin comes, teleports right in front of you to your right, your aim tracks to the right, you mess up your stun on the boss, yeah? And then it's like game over. Your DPS is screwed. So it's like, aim assist is a big thing. So I want to deal with all the harpies and the goblins on that runway. I'm taking those out. I've got a high energy fire on. Right, we've got, we're going to get radiant, but first we're going to do a barricade. We'll wait for eyes, and this is where you stun. Right, so there's 12 eyes, I think there is. Now you don't want to sustain fire the eyes. You just want to do a click or two. Not a click, but, you know, a tap fire on each sort of eye, right? The quicker you are at getting the eyes, the better. Then you proc bait and switch and a radiant, right, with your hammer, and then you need to make sure that you hit most of your shots, if not all of them, to get a sort of perfect phase. I could have done more linear shots there. I was actually ahead of my time there. So to explain DPS a little bit more in depth, because that's the most critical thing. When you shoot that final tower, the music changes. Obviously, I've got my music knocked off, but the music will change, and then the boss will round themselves to you. The boss will then sort of do this spin, and then the eyes will open. As soon as the eyes open, DPS has started. I consider that as the DPS, because the slower you are at shooting their eyes, the less DPS time you get. So it is critical that you have a good primary on that you are comfortable with at shooting the eyes. I used a 720 RPM auto rifle, which done a really good job as well. But I went back to mini tool because I didn't want to swap all the time. But it's up to you as a console. I'm talking to console players. It's up to you what you want to do to shoot their eyes. You need a really good fast fire rate or primary of your choice. SMG is probably going to be the best option, either that or an auto rifle. But nothing else. I mean, I don't know what a trace would be like. That's something. Maybe the trace would be amazing at shooting the eyes and it'd be quick. That's something I've just thought about now and I might try on another character. And if it means you can get more DPS time on the boss, then that's critical. It means that your damage is going to be that much better, because if with the bait and switch, right? So you're gonna end up shooting 10 shots. You could reload and get another 2 or 3 in, which would make your DPS phase that much better. You would turn like a 4 phase into a 3 phase when you're doing that. But here's the thing: on console, you can't shoot the eyes as quick as somebody on PC. Now, this isn't I'm not making this a console versus PC war thing, because I never have been like that, and I've talked to a lot of PC players, and I like a lot of them. But I will say that it's far easier to shoot the eyes solo on PC, because you can just strafe your SMG everywhere, spray it. You can't do it like that on console. Try it. If you disagree with me and you're on PC, try it. Go and plug it. Go on your PS5, go on your Xbox, try it, and come back to me. You're going to get what I'm saying is you're going to be far less efficient than a PC player shooting the eyes solo. Team-wise, it doesn't matter, because there's 3 of you to shoot the eyes. You don't get an extension of time just because you're solo. It's the same time, which actually, in my eyes, it should have been an extension of time. Like, the game should sort of know you're solo, so you need that little bit more time. So I don't like the way how the DPS works on this boss, if you can't tell. I wish what they had done is, once all eyes are shot, a DPS timer starts on your left hand side, give it 20 seconds, 15 seconds, wherever it be, and that way we're all on a plane level, and everybody's DPS is the same. That's all I wanted. Like, any other boss fight works like that. You start any other boss fight in any other dungeon, it's a timer on the left hand side. It works. Don't mess with what works. But the problem is, they've robbed these mechanics from Garden of Salvation, so they haven't done any improvised with it. They probably just took it fresh out of that boss fight, and they just said, right, here we go, we'll put that in the dungeon. They should have done it. I don't know why they haven't done it, because this is not solo friendly at all. And the dungeons were made for solo players. They said that. They've said that in the past, that they're for solo players. That's what they were made for. And this dungeon is not solo friendly. This boss isn't, at least, because the DPS window is far too short. So we're on phase 2 now. Notice I've cleared all the harpies, I've cleared all the goblins, all the general stuff. Always make sure you got your hands in fire. I've got font of might on, but because as I've spoke about, with ads messing me up with the eyes and stuff, I wasn't even gonna consider trying to get font of might going. I was happy enough with the 116k per shot I'm getting with bait and switch and just doing it like that. There's 2 holes on the runway for each. That they're designed for you to drop down. Right, now you might find your crits are harder to get at the very back where the tower is, so you might want to start walking forward. Play it like what you do with Garden of Salvation when that boss starts to go back. Play it like that. Just go a bit closer to the boss so you make sure that you do get your crits, because missing any crit at all will hinder your DPS massively. Now if I not missed one shot prior and hit a couple more shots on the first phase, I probably would have been out of 4 phases this fight. Right? I think so anyways, at least. So it's tight. Without font of might, because I do have font of might on, but obviously I'm not killing a goblin before DPS and all that stuff. Without font of might, it's the damage window is tight to get the 4 phase. So for most of you, even with like a bait and switch linear and hitting all your shots, best for most on a Titan at least. I've seen gameplay of like a Hunter and Warlock doing better for DPS as opposed to Titan. You know, Hunter's got the Gathering Storm, Warlock's got Nova or Well. The Titan excels at surviving in this dungeon, right? So it's probably maybe the easiest that way, but you have to go so many more damage phases. It's same is true for the final boss fight. So it's a case of, I don't think Titan's number 1 in this. It is for surviving probably, but not for DPS. DPS it's gonna be Hunter or Warlock. Warlock, some people are hitting some crazy times, like doing it in 30 minutes. So Warlock's probably the king. If you are a PvE man for Warlock, probably do this dungeon with Warlock. And I'll be looking forward to doing a Warlock run, to be honest. I really will. So another thing about ammo is try and get some kills with your weapons. Don't get all your kills like with the goblins and stuff. Don't just get kills with your hammer. I know it's tempting to do that, but you're not going to get the ammo. So that's another thing with the 4th times the charm on Cataclysmic is my ammo goes so much more further. So like if I've only got 12 shots, that's enough. If I've only got 10 shots for the last DPS phase, that's more than enough shots, right, for DPS for one of the phases. Whereas if I was using some other linear like Taipan, which is very good by the way, I did use it. I was putting out some good damage numbers. That was without font as well. Like if you put that on maybe like a Void Walker, you'd be doing some good damage with Taipan. Don't sleep on that. But the ammo's not going to go as far, right? And I think overall still the bait and switch is going to obviously beat it out. But if you obviously haven't got a bait and switch linear, then Taipan with the triple tap. So we're just doing our general ad clear. The harpies will be annoying to you in this fight. That's the most annoying. Be careful of the Minotaurs and bosses because they can knock you off the runway. I nearly did by that Minotaur there. So have a good awareness of your surroundings. Right? Don't be too focused on like, I'm going for the fuses, I'm doing this, I'm doing that. Like be aware that boss, because I say, sometimes floats above you and then it can knock you off map. Not that it stomps you off map, it just sort of floats by you sometimes. But yeah, take out all the harpies because they're going to flinch the hell out of you on boss DPS, and I don't like it. As I say, I need to hit my shots as a console player, and if I don't, I'm losing so much damage. So I take out all the harpies every phase, and that's what makes this run longer for me, is that I'm actually clearing out the harpies. I understand other people aren't. On well, it might not be as bad to sort of not deal with the harpies and just go shoot all the towers boss DPS. Do it like that, but Yeah, I take all the harpies and the goblins, most of the goblins on each runway. The boss is being freaky right now. I don't know what's going on. But we'll get a barricade down. That's for the quicker. That's for the reload. I think it stacks with everything with SMG load. I'm not sure. I think it does. I just put it down anyways because it procs my restoration. So we'll proc bait and switch, then our radiant. I'm going to jump over this first hole, right? Just because I want to be a little bit close to the boss, and I'll make sure I hit all my shots. I got ammo there to load up. I think that's what happened. And I got much more damage in, so I shot a couple more shots there. I don't know what happened there. Why it reloaded to 6? That's odd. I haven't got Vice Sting. Obviously, it hasn't got Vice Stinger, so I don't know what happened there. But I got a couple more shots in for that DPS phase, so we pulled it back. Even though I lost damage a little bit on phase 1, I pulled it back, so I am in territory to kill the boss in one more phase, but I don't think I do. I just lose out just a little bit. So that's what I'm on about. It's very tight, the damage. And for me as a content creator, what you got to realize is, for me at least, I take enjoyment of using versatile loadouts, lots of different weapons on dungeons. How does this weapon work in this dungeon? How does this weapon work? And you can make countless videos like that, and I've been very successful at doing that. That's the only really thing that's being kept the channel from growing, is doing stuff like that. But with this dungeon, I don't see any versatility. I don't see any unique stuff that you can do with it unless something crazy comes out, like say like Warcliffe Coil does crazy damage, because sometimes it does to bosses. Say if something like that comes out, then great. But solo wise, I don't see any versatility with these runs. Bait and switch for first boss. Second boss, you could even use bait and switch again for the final boss. But other than that, rockets and a super. If you're on Warlock, it's well. If you're on a Hunter, Arc Staff. Like, can you go and glaive the boss? Right? Because there's a glaive mod on for resistance. Is there anything there? Probably not. Boss will probably kill you. I know there's Aegis Scepter that does well on the final boss. There's that. But there's not a lot of stuff to make comment on, so I'm probably just going to get my free solo flawlesses, not touch the dungeon for quite a bit, and then touch it again at the back end of the season or something. Because, like I say, I'm not massively enjoying the DPS phases, and that's for me. If you don't know me, I like boss fights. That's the biggest thing about Destiny's. I like its boss fights, and if the boss fight ain't good, then I'm not enjoying it too much. Like, it is good, it's alright, but like I said, there's no combat experience. Where's that at? Obviously I'm playing Grandmasters. I solo Grandmasters, so there's a combat experience in playing solo Grandmasters. There's no combat experience with this right now. What I'm doing right here, right, what am I doing? What am I doing? I'm doing nothing. I'm just waiting for the next phase. I'm clearing harpies so that they don't flinch me on DPS. That's all I'm doing. I'm not like struggling to fight for my life, which I should be. I should be struggling right now. Even Prophecy, after all these years, people still struggle with it because you've got to... If you're not on point with your stuff, you will die in that dungeon. It doesn't matter that it's 1350 power. It doesn't matter about that. You're still going to die in it. When the experienced players won't be able to do it. This one though, if you know the fuses and you're not good at killing adds, doesn't matter. So that's what I don't like, is the aspect is too intensive on DPS. Like, it's super strict on DPS, yet on ad clear it's not very strict at all. There's no balance to it. The farm boss is a little bit better than this, I'll be honest. A little bit better. And a key point of, I think this boss, somebody let me know, I think this boss is 1570 or 1580. Right, but the farm boss is 1590, I think. Which means you can level up, you can over level the boss. Whereas right now we're already over leveled for this boss, I think. I'm not sure if this boss is 1590 or 1570. But if it is 1590, that means you can get more DPS when you get to 1610. So, I know some of you don't like leveling and all that stuff, but if you want to get a better solos and stuff in this dungeon, level up. Which I will be. I want to run this dungeon again at 1610 or 16.5, and I want to see how it is on the final boss at least, because your damage will increase. Yeah? So, we'll see how that goes. We're close here, but we don't end up getting, as I say, in that phase. If I do, as I said, the shots that I missed has cost me. I should have finished the fight now. But what I'm going to do this time, because it's only 5%, is I'm just going to rush all the towers. this is how people generally do this boss fight, by the way. They'll just rush all the towers and start DPS, and that's it. They won't have no regard for the ads, harpies, nothing. They'll just start it. So I'm going to show you. You can really just run through the towers and get the DPS right away. And that's the thing with this fight, is that there's little work to get to DPS, but when you get to DPS, there's a lot of work. Whereas I would like there's not a lot of time. What I preferred is where the game, or in dungeons, where you have to do a lot to get to DPS, like even Pit of Heresy or Prophecy, where you've got to do quite a bit. There's this thing to do, that thing to do, but when you actually get a DPS, you can get a good sizable chunk on that boss, and you get a good sizable amount of time, like 40 to 50 seconds on bosses. Now this boss, I understand it is the way it's designed, because there's runways, right? I understand how it is, but that one little change that I said about when all eyes are shot, a timer for DPS starts. 20 seconds, 15 seconds, whatever it might be, and that way the DPS phases will be a bit more consistent for everybody, solo-wise, and it won't be as annoying to play. Team-wise is different. A couple of people have talked to me about, well, in a team I ran Galley, 2 rockets, blah blah blah. I'm not interested in that. I understand that team is completely different. This dungeon will be well balanced for a team. Actually, it'd be quite fun in a team. I haven't even played it in a team yet. It will be fun in a team, and I'm looking forward to doing it in a team, to be honest. But solo-wise, it's balanced, not right there. They could make the changes, but I doubt they will, because they never do change mechanics that are so fixated in the dungeon. They don't. They only do balance changes around the dungeon, which does annoy me slightly, because sometimes it's like, right, why don't they just listen and do certain things? But they don't. We know that. So I have zero doubts that they're going to change intrinsic things about the dungeon. You know, but I'm very surprised, because dungeons were made for solo players, as I said. They forgot about that vision when they made this one. I definitely think that. For this boss fight, at the very least, all the other accountants aren't too bad at all. And as I said, there's no combat thing that you're going to struggle with or anything like that. So we're on the final tower, I believe. Yeah, just double checking. We're leaving all the harpies up. It doesn't matter if I get flinched to high hell, because it just doesn't, because the boss is dead. Right, so the only thing that can stop me now is if I don't shoot all the eyes in time. If that happens, the boss will do his blast attack. If that happens where you are right now, you need to get out of there, because you will definitely wipe at that range. So the blast damage does more damage the closer you are to the boss. Yeah? But if the boss is all the way down that runway, the boss, yes, will blast you back a bit, but the radius won't be as bad. And you're less likely to get knocked off map. It'd be quite rare for the boss to knock you off map if the boss was at the other end. Yeah? That's what I've found. So anyways, that's that boss fight explained. So this next encounter is pretty cool. I quite enjoyed it. It's a intermission encounter to sort of break up the boss fights. I quite like the aesthetic of it. It's Warmind-esque feeling. I like the way the dungeon looks. Especially, it reminded me a little bit of 0 Hour with the blades. There's some fan blades coming up, some difficult jumps. I like that. It's again repeating the same mechanic with the fuses. The difference is that these are red. Now, I haven't really explained this, and this is where the final boss fight steps it up just a little bit for the currents. There's red currents and yellow currents, and they intrinsically behave slightly different. So the yellow current is like a circuit. You need to find the start and the end and in between, and you just shoot the fuses. But if you lose your buff halfway through a yellow current, you could go and get a buff again and continue your progress. None of your progress is lost. Makes sense? But on the red current, there's no order for them to be shot in. But they are on a timer, and if you don't shoot all of them in the specific time, then they reset and you have to shoot them again. So the red ones are easier. So look, you can shoot these in any pattern. This is the first combination. You just need to have the angle to shoot all the fuses in the timer, which I'm going to say it's about 10 seconds. It's probably 10 seconds. So that's the difference between red and yellow currents. Now this can also end a solo flawless, so do not mess this jump up. Make sure you do your research about stuff like this, because if you got to this point and you never realised these fans could kill you, you've done all that work, got to this so far, and you die. So them fans, you need to pay real attention, take your time with it, don't rush. You're not speedrunning this. If you are speedrunning this, you're not watching this video, are you? So take your time with them jumps. Unless you're really confident with it by now. The dungeon's barely been out any time at all, so I imagine most people aren't comfortable with it yet. This is floor 2, so there's 3 floors, right? Everything's in threes with this. Initial set of ads, just clear them. There's some fanatics that could potentially wipe you, that is the only risk, but even then, you've got Splendor on. That's why I chose it for people, because what you need to understand is, I know I'm on Splendor, and I know that I probably don't need to use Splendor for me as a player, but the video isn't for me, it's for somebody to watch. The video isn't for me. Obviously I ended up getting the Emblem through it. I understand that, so I am getting something out of it. I love the Solar Flawless Emblems, but I went with this loadout because my idea was to do Titan first, all day long, because I was the highest level with the Titan. And I'd already started practicing on the Titan on day 1, so I wanted to do Titan all day long. Next will be probably Warlock or Hunter, depending. So I could have used other stuff. I could have went on Arc 3.0. You could have went on Stasis even. You know, there's all sorts of options subclass wise I could have used, but I was thinking what would be the best for the viewer to use. And I think definitely Solar Titan for survivability, because you're not clearing the ads. So what are the ads doing? They're peppering you all the time. So if you get weak while you're peppering, while you're shooting the fuses, it doesn't matter, because Splendor's going to kick in. So it's the perfect exotic for this. And in my defense, I barely use Splendor. You pull up any videos I've used of Splendor, I've barely used it. Probably day 1 King's Fall. That's the last time I've probably used it, like in a video. So yeah, I barely use Splendor in my defense, so I feel as though it's completely fine for me to use it. They nerfed it a little bit, but it's still super strong though, let's be honest. But I don't want them to nerf it at all. Let's keep it the way it is. Right? Just leave it as it is for ages. They do that with other exotics, you know, Controverse Hold on a Warlock. How long has that been strong for? Forsaken. 4 years that exotic's been strong, and they've never touched it. Like they've adjusted it slightly, but they've never nerfed it. So why nerf Splendor? Why one rule for one exotic but not a rule for another one? It makes no sense sometimes, the way they're balanced and stuff. So yeah, don't touch Splendor. Leave it as it is. This is the support exotic for Titans who want to start practicing playing Titan. That's my take on it. Don't touch it. We know it's OP, but the game thrives when there's stuff OP in the game. So just leave it. Just leave it as it is. The fuses, there's 5 switches in this room. 1 in the middle. It's all about finding the angle of the one in the middle, and then this is the exit. So that's the easiest floor. So that's job done for that. You can lose a flawless here as well. You could break your legs. So just jump down at each platform and don't rush. As I said at the start of the video, you're gonna want a rocket. I recommend it over a linear. I'll explain why in a minute. Your best solar rocket, or whatever rocket that you want to use, I recommend that. A solar rocket would help out massively though, if you could do that. We'll switch to hands-on, take off linear fusion mods, and then we can get on with the final boss. Okay, so with the final boss, obviously we'll put a banner in first. You can double rocket reserve chestplate first if you want, and then swap back. I didn't even bother doing that, as this fight doesn't have a high demand on ammo, especially on, not so much on Titan at least. It's not a high demand on ammo. Obviously I put that rocket on that I mentioned that has Vorpal plus overflow, so when I pick up a brick, there'll be 2 loaded, which is critical that I've got that for the setup and DPS and stuff. So as the fight starts, right, we'll explain everything from the get-go. As the fight starts, you'll have 2 Vex Hydras to take out. Once you kill the 2 Vex Hydras, that then spawns in the Vex Minotaurs that we've been killing the entire dungeon. That gives you the buff to shoot the fuses. So again, it's repeating what we've already saw, but it's upped from the Harpy boss because there's yellow and red currents. as I said, there's a difference between yellow and red. Now obviously you need to shoot the red currents first, because what the red currents does is it opens up the door, right? Because there's 2 rooms to this arena, so that'll open up the door, right? So that'll be the first step done. Then you can then shoot the yellow currents, because the yellow currents go all the way to the second room. Now there's 4 pillars in that first room that I was just in, and only 2 of them will be open. So that's your start of where the current is, and you then need to see where the route is. Now I've already made a video about obviously this boss fight, because I uploaded day 1, the solo one, and I've sort of explained already that it's hard for me to show or teach, well, to teach you at least, the routes for each one, because obviously there's 4 different routes. It's just a case of memory of knowing where to shoot and when. So this one, like here, this route that I'm on here, which is the right hand side, sorry, I always remember that the Riven has a chance to hit you in the back. So what I do is let the Riven come through the door first, so I can shoot that awkward fuse right there, the one below the stairs, or to the left of the walkway, sorry. So just little things like that, on just being patient with the boss, right? The boss obviously is a threat at all times. Well, not at all times, but will continually chase you slowly. There's different tips and tricks, I guess, with the boss, where you can sort of don't try to rush it. You don't have to rush it. I mean, the quicker you go, the safer it'll be, I guess, if you know what you're doing. But if you don't, if you haven't got the routine down exactly, just take your time, because with the yellow currents, if you do lose your buff, your progress is saved up into the blue wire, because obviously it goes from yellow to blue, so it's saved. Now we've messed up our first phase, which is what's made this longer. So if you notice what I've done, schoolboy error, to be honest. This is the first time I actually messed up in the run, where this is probably the major mistake I've done. Everything else was fine. There was no real major mistakes that I've done, but this was the only mistake I've done, is that I completed the yellow circuit, the second one, without the boss being in the second room. So generally that's not an issue, and it's the first time I've done it. I've actually soloed this 3 times. This was the third, the flawless. So 2 occasions before this I had never done this, so I was just too eager to shoot the final current, and the boss was in the first room. So don't do that, because you actually waste a phase. There's no enrage mechanics, so don't worry, you're not going to lose it like that, but you waste your time. So I wasted the first 4 or 5 minutes of this fight because of that. So just bear that in mind. The fight's a little longer than what it should be because of that. This particular route can be awkward a little bit, so you've got to use the pillar. See, if you use the pillar, it stops the Riven from the boss to sort of, because sometimes you'll do occasionally that big lunge that all Rivens do. You just need to pay attention to that and be vigilant. That's why we've obviously stuck with Healing Grenade for this. There's no real reason to use a nade for anything. Your Throwing Hammer mini tool will do all your outplay that you could ever want or need. You having like a solar grade on or a fusion grade isn't going to really do anything for you, right? To be honest, so it's something there to use, because with Splendor, what you're going to realise is we're doing a lot of running and gunning. Now, if you're not clearing many of the ads out, if you get weak while you're in mid-air, it will consume your barrier and the sunspot, but the sunspot will be behind you in mid-air, and it won't have procced. Yeah? So then if you're still weak, you have a second way of restoration via your healing nade. So, like there, it procced, because I'm on the floor, the sunspot spawned on top of me, so I got the restoration. So that's another reason why we just double up on heal, and why not? There's no need. Right, so now we're up for actual DPS. Before that phase though, you've got to shoot the currents again. Take note, I've still got Roaring Flames. I've had an upkeep of Roaring Flames ×3. That is critical. And obviously I've got my rocket launcher loaded with 2. So as DPS, this is how I do it, right? Start with Witherhoard for debuff, 2 rockets, Witherhoard again, Throwing Hammer, then Super. We still have Roar and Flame ×3 for half of the super at least. That's so much more damage though. We'll keep using our hammers. Then when we come out of super, we'll do a rocket again. Now, why is my rocket reloaded again? I don't know is the answer. I don't have auto-loading holster on this rocket. I've been playing this a little bit, and what I've noticed is, for some reason, your weapons reload again halfway through the fight. Why that's a thing, I haven't a clue. I swear to you that my rocket does not have auto-loading holster on, and I used another rocket and the same thing was happening. After I come out my super, my rocket was reloaded again. Is that a bug? I don't know what that is. Is that some sort of mechanic I'm missing? I don't think so, but yeah. By the way, it works every time. Every time after I come out of super, my rocket's reloaded, ready to go again. And it just gives that little bit more DPS, you know. So look, we've done probably... It's probably 20% that we've done there. Around about that. So the phase starts over again, right? Now, this obviously door is... You can come into this room and fight the ads from here as well. It's all about gaining super. Now this is why I made Splendor Arc, because I've got hands on. I gain super energy on melee kills. Now I recommend that you farm a super up every DPS phase. It might take a little longer like that, but your DPS will be a bit better. It'll be better than just not. On a time at least, right? Obviously there's linears. Obviously I could have used bait and switch. The reason why I didn't is because the crit spot on the boss is quite awkward. That would then prompt me to do a different setup like bubble. So I can sort of like strafe in and out of a bubble while I'm DPSing with the linear. Whereas on this class it's kind of like you've got to keep backing up. I feel as though it's just not as good overall. Maybe on a walk in a well where you're just sitting in a well. Yeah, sure, that would be better. But I think the rocket's better for this class. Because I'm focusing mainly on the Roar and Flames, Hammer of Sol super, and the rocket. That's just how we're doing our damage, and it's okay damage. I could have got better damage by putting on Symphoceps, same people do that, but I just wanted to stick with the safety of the build, with the theme of what I've been doing the entire thing. Just sort of stick with Splendor, because Splendor's still handy to use. For this. Now, as I said, the red currents, they can they're on a timer, so sometimes right here I was actually getting pressured by a couple of the ads, so I missed a couple of my not getting the red current in time. I swear we shot that. That's absolutely annoying. So it's reset again, I think. Yeah, so I have to do it again. Things like this cost us a bit of time, but as I said, I'm not too fussed. You've got to keep an eye on these supplicants, because as I say, they can wipe you. I was actually quite lucky there. So it's not a free, even though like one of them explodes, it's not, you're still going to have, there's a chance of you still dying. Splendor should proc, but obviously, you know, I would just be careful of the supplicants. That's the biggest danger, that and the boss itself, right? So now we've opened the door, phase 2, same thing. We've got super as well, so we're good to go for damage. I farmed that before we opened the door, or got most of. You should probably farm most of your super. Not, you don't need to do your full buy every time like this, but for the most part, farm up your super. Because if you do zoom it and just shoot all the fuses, you won't have your super in time. I've tested it, tried it, and obviously you don't want to rock high intellect. There's no point in doing that in PvE. Obviously you only ever need one buff. This is a note as well for DPS, is that with the Minotaurs, they're always here, but if you clear one side and not the other, then only one Minotaur will be up. Preferably for just before DPS you want both up, unless you've got to add in middle. Just depends on what you're clearing ad wise. I'm sure you're not going to be able to keep, not all of you are going to be able to keep track. You're just killing stuff to survive and stuff. So keep the 2 Minotaurs up, right? But if you want to farm them for super and stuff like that, then always clear 2 at a time, so you get 2 to respawn for DPS. Because you might like be thinking, oh, I want to go this side for this Minotaur, and if that meter's not there, and you lose your Roaring Flames. That's a substantial amount of damage you'll have lost. Obviously, Fountain Might's going to proc for us. So that's at least good, because I've got a Solar Rocket on. So that's another thing that's going to help our damage, because it does stack with like High Energy Fire and stuff like that. So that's another thing that's going to help. All these little things. It's a nightmare for the player who hasn't got all these stuff. Who hasn't got the mods and stuff. Nightmare for them. If you do this with no mods, like no Solo Operative, no Weaken Clear, no High Energy Fire, no Font of Might, no damage bonuses at all, your damage will be really poor. But again, it's a light level gated thing, this, right? Your damage will only improve, right, the better you, the higher your power. So you'll be, at 1610, you'll be able to do far more damage than what you are doing in 1590s or even 1580s. Our damage is exactly the same, identical. Witherhoard, 2 rockets, then re-Witherhoard up so that you keep the damage whilst your super's going on. Another rocket, Witherhoard again, and then that's our damage. A bit better of damage that time, I think. But for the most part, you're going to 5 phases fight on Titan, at least on this setup. If you in the 1590 range, if you're higher than that in the 1600s, most people aren't. But there is people approaching there. But later on in the season, you're going to find this solo easier for damage thing. There's going to be less phases for you to do, therefore easier. But I'm very interested to see how it'll be when you're 1610. Which, as I said, when you get to that level, I'll rerun it. But obviously we've got other characters to do. I will do a Warlock Solar Flawless and a Hunter Solar Flawless. We'll do all 3. I always do for everyone. I'm not favoritism to any class per se. I just done the Titan first because I was highest power on him and it made sense for Pinnacles and all that stuff. So it's just rinse and repeat from here. There's not really much help. Like as I said at the start, this is hard to commentate on this. I generally always have something to talk about. You'll know that with the dungeons that I've done in the past, you know, and I've done them over years, multiple runs. But with this dungeon, I'm finding difficult on what to exactly tell you, what to talk about, because there's only one mechanic. There's no, I mean, I guess, as I said, with combat, this is the hardest part because in the entire dungeon, because you have got to have some good movement. There'll be times when the boss is right on top of you and stuff like that. So you've got to have a good idea of how quick the boss is, how quickly you can bait from left and right, and how much time you actually have to start shooting. Maybe you need to start shooting a fresh circuit on left or right. How much time have you exactly got to complete that route? Well, you won't know that until you have practice and experience of doing the routes. That's the biggest thing, is having the experience of doing these routes. So if you wipe on your first run for solo and you get here, don't restart the run. Practice the boss fight until it's perfect, until you know the routes inside out, so you can sort of shoot the fuses in advance, so you know exactly where you're going all the times. Rather than just like, oh, was it this fuse, was it that fuse, and then whilst you're looking at the fuse, the boss is gaining distance on you, and then the supplicants gaining distance on you, and that's where your wipes will be. You probably won't wipe on DPS because your main focus is the boss and stuff. It'll be when you try to shoot all these fuses and then you're getting flinched. That's another thing. You're getting flinched a lot when you try to shoot the fuses. So there's a high demand on movement in this, but it does get easier. As day one I was like, this is quite crazy. They're making you do all this movement, and you know, but the more you do the routes, the easier they get. Easier it'll get, obviously, for you. Because it will just look like every time, first time you're watching this, if you've never been in here, you'll be like, well, I couldn't remember what route was that or what route was this. It's just a case of your memory, and just a case of just keep doing it over and over. That's how I learned with it anyways. Couldn't pick up the hammer there. Always like sort of judge the situation before as well. Like if there's 2-3 harpies there and your hammer's just lying there, don't go and pick it up. you know, it might be just worth just strafing past them so that they explode, then pick up and stuff like that. Where's the boss? And you've got to make live decision making as you doing this. Yeah, there's not too many ads, but there is enough to sort of screw it up, especially if you haven't got Splendor on. That's why I did keep on Splendor, because it's your get out of jail free card, just in case things do go wrong. Then Splendor's there to sort of save you. It lacks damage, but it gains on survivability, as opposed to like using Simpercepts or something like that. We're keeping an uptime on our Roaring Flames. I know you can't always see it because there's only 4 lines of text that buffs can show on the left hand side. Kind of annoying. I wish it would be like, why is it not more lines of text than 4? It should be 5 or 6. Especially with now how things are. You've got attrition buff, you've got damage bonus, Roaring Flames, Charge of Light, Font of Might. Like, sometimes it's kind of annoying you can't keep track of all your buffs and the timers. Same thing again, debuff, 2 rockets, Witherhoard, then a Thrown Hammer, may as well, just to get that damage up a little bit more. And we'll keep our distance as well from the boss just a little bit. Once we've exited our super grenade rocket for just that little bit more damage. Every little bit helps, as they say. And then by looking at that damage, we can't get him in. We can definitely get him in 2 more phases, I think. We do end up getting him in 2 phases actually. So as you can see, the damage is pretty decent. What we're doing. Imagine this, as I say, a bit higher. It isn't. That's the biggest thing for Titan mains in this. Is you're gonna sort of, especially if you're low in light, you're gonna say, well, what's my options? You know, you could go Thunder Crash, but do you really want Thunder Crash on? You know, I mean, what does Storm Grenade damage do to him? I haven't tested that. That's something I would maybe want to look at. But that's your only really options on a Titan. I suppose you would be able to get your damage out quicker, because T-Crash would be so fast. So, you know, that is an option for your Titan mains. Just know that you're going to lack survivability. So if you're new to the dungeon, I don't recommend the Arc. If you've got your Soul Floss already, on your next one, you might want to try Arc. That's probably what I'll do on the next Titan run, but I'll focus Warlock and Hunter before that. Another thing I found difficult at times, or maybe annoying, is shooting the red currents when there's supplicants chasing you. It was just sort of an annoyance a little bit. Not being able to sort of multitask with them at times, because that can wipe you whilst you're looking up trying to shoot these stupid currents, and then, you know, the supplicants are on top of you. That can be a wipe. That actually has wiped me in the past. So you've got to have that awareness. Where are the supplicants? Have they spawned on right? Perfect. We'll take the currents from left then, and then quickly, you know, sort of shoot them that way. And you can be shot in any order. You could do middle first, just whatever angle's best to you. Try and, if there's lots of supplicants, try and shoot the red currents in the air. That's another thing. That's another reason why we've got the SMG on, because it's good for running and gunning like that. Either this, or I can see a 720 RPM auto rifle being decent, or even a trace. I've seen someone actually use a trace on this fight. They were just sort of zapping each current, and that was like, that's kind of good, because you know, it's just quickly taking them out easier. Every little bit helps with it. But again, that's why I said at the start, you need to find a good primary that you like using. It might not be Mini Tool. There's plenty of SMGs in the game. It could be anything. It could be Akelous, it could be Funnel Web, it could be a couple of the new SMGs that come out. There's an Arc one that came out pretty recent. Like, not Akelous, a different one. There's all sorts. Now, if you're going to shoot this one here, this fuse particular, you need to be quick about it, because as you enter this room, you've got like that fire. It depends on how close the boss is, but you either wait or you go for it. You've got to make that live decision. That's what I'm saying. If you're not comfortable with that particular fuse, I feel as though that's the most awkward one. Then just wait until the boss comes in the room. The boss will then loop round into the middle platform. You can quickly jump over, get that fuse, and then jump back. If you know what I mean. Little tips like that. Everyone will have their own little niches of getting around things in this fight, because there's a lot of different things that you can do, I guess, with baiting the boss round. But that's what I'm saying. The more custom you add with these routes, you might come to the point where you don't even need to know where the boss exactly is. You just that quick at completing the route, it wouldn't matter. So again, it just depends on how accustomed you are with doing it. Try and keep it a good uptime on our Roaring Flames because this is the final phase. I think what I end up doing wrong here, so I've kept it up, as I said with the 2 Minotaurs, you keep the Roaring Flames. So I've still got Roaring Flames in the background here, but when you shoot the 5 fuses, you need to re-proc Roaring Flames. So I was meant to go for the other Minotaur and I forgot. So I end up losing Roaring Flames here. I've noticed there, you can see I was going to do it, but then I was like, oh, I'm too late. So this phase I actually do less damage because I lost Roaring Flames. So it didn't impact the run because I was still going to have to do another phase anyways. So it was okay as long as I didn't do that on more than... If I'd done that on every run, I would have ended up having to do an extra phase on top of what I'd done. So it was okay. It meant that I would still be able to kill him in the next phase anyways. But I wouldn't make a habit of doing that. Make sure that you are remembering to keep your Roaring Flames up. With Symphoseps, you want to keep some adds up and stuff like that, which is going to add a bit of difficulty for people. That's why I didn't do Symphoseps for people, just, you know, because you've got to strategize a little bit more on top of shooting your fuses, right? What adds are alive? I need to keep this goblin alive. I need to do this. I need to do that. There's a bit more to it. There's a bit more playmaking to be done then, which I didn't want to do. I wanted to put a loadout on for most that they don't need to think as much. They still need to. You still need to get the Roaring Flames because you're losing out on so much damage by not using Symphos. So you still need to get the Roaring Flames, but that isn't too difficult to do. Just literally 2 hammer throws. And as long as you keep killing both Minotaurs, not just one, then you've got 2 Minotaurs to re-keep your buff. Right now I'm just sat farming super. You can see how much super I'm getting off those Minotaurs, which is more than a red bar because they're an orange bar. So you get a little bit, you get a sizable amount. That's what I'm saying. Hands-on's really good because if you don't have something like that on, or even like some super perk, or maybe acid, if you ran a different nade, you could have ashes to assets on or something. If you don't do that, you're waiting for your super for such a long time, and if you might be fatigued by this point. Like most people are soloing this in like 40 to 50 minutes, or some people are even longer, like myself. But to wait that long for your super on a run like this, you don't want. You want to have something on to get your super back, because you're going to want a super for every DPS phase. So it's critical to have something on like that. We've opened the final door. Now it's just the final 2 yellow routes that we need to take. We have super, so everything's set up. Do a healing nade there because the boss slammed us, which from time to time the boss does do that. I hadn't talked about resistance at all, I guess, because resistance didn't really matter. All that mattered was tier 10 resistance for the entire dungeon. That's all you needed. But when you get here, you need void resistance, I think. Void resistance on, I think, because those Horman missiles are going to hit you. For you know, that's going to be your biggest threat. So I reckon the best resistance is tier 10. Concussive dampener helps against stomps and stuff like that, and area of effect damage, and a void resist. I used that for the entire dungeon. Which, as I said, the resistance didn't matter too much. It's when you get here, because you're in tight rooms and stuff. Be wary of the bosses to my left. Like I say, I knew that I was ahead of time there, so it's little things like that. How much time have you got to shoot these fuses is dependent on you and your feel for it. You've got to get a feel of how the dungeon plays. Like any other dungeon, with Shattered Throne, Prophecy, you get to know these little things that you wouldn't think about, but you intrinsically know. You intrinsically know how the dungeon plays without sort of thinking about it, and that's the stage you want to get to. When you get to that stage, you'll solo flawless comfortably. There's not a lot of risk in this apart from the supplicants, really. So we're on DBS. We've kept up our Roaring Flames just in case I was to, like, say, miss a rocket. That would screw up damage. So again, Witherhoard 2 rockets, Witherhoard again, throwing hammer, super. And that will just about finish the boss off. You can see the yellow numbers. It does decent damage. Like I said, I would like to see this at a higher power, what the damage would be. But that was a solo flawless for this dungeon. I don't want to be too overly negative about it. I think it's a good dungeon. It suffers from a couple of problems. Mainly DPS windows is my issue with it. But aesthetically, the dungeon looks good. The emblem looks good. The loot looks good. So I'm overall happy with it. I would say it's an 8 out of 10 dungeon. But that was a solo flawless for this. Hope you enjoy. Thank you.